Hi, I'm Vic Bearcroft, and today I'm going to show you how to paint this atmospheric portrait of a hare sitting in long grass, a long sunny meadow at this time of year, with pastels on velour paper. As usual, I started with a soft outline using a charcoal pencil. You can use a black pastel if you want to, but make sure it's not too heavy. So if anything you want to change, you can rub out or paint over fairly easily. So we'll start with our tonal sketch, which is going to enhance the outline a little bit with some fur texture and bits and pieces like that, and then add some tone to create a more three-dimensional form. So I'll start with the ears and work down. It doesn't really matter on the lawn where you start, because you can't rub it out with the side of your hand. Not easily anyway. So let's begin refining our sketch a little bit using a rounded corner of a hard black pastel. Keep it nice and soft. The sharper the corner, then the harder the mark is going to be. So I always recommend starting with a rounded corner to keep everything nice and soft and build on it. Fine details will always come much later on. So in a minute we're just refining the sketch a little bit. Don't worry about tones just yet. That will come later on. The big ears that the hares have. And this inside section we can start sort of cutting out the hairs of the hair that go inside the ears, excuse the pun. And slightly darker in the centre of the ear. I don't want to do too hard an outline around the ears and the head and the face, because I want to get a nice sort of sunlit, not a halo, but a sunlit highlight. Imagining the hair in a light, soft summer meadow, some green grass and maybe some wildflowers at the end, and a nice soft summery light shining down. Again, don't go too heavy with the outline. There's the eyebrows there, they'll be paler. And a little bit more careful around the eyes, of course, or the eye in this case, only one. Use a slightly sharper corner of the black pastel. And the pupil. Don't worry about the reflections in the eye at this point, so you don't need to leave a space for that reflected highlight. So you just painting the whole pupil as is, and then start adding fur texture around the head. And remember, the most important thing when you start to paint or draw fur is the length and the direction. Get those two right, length and direction and thickness, and you're on to a winner. So in this case, the fur is quite short around the head and the cheeks and so on. And coming down into the neck, maybe a little bit longer. And then we're going to have our hair just poking his head up out of the long grass, so we can fade out this bottom bit. We don't need to take that all the way down, certainly in terms of detail. We'll just put a few little shadows in the fur. This is what we're doing in a minute, of course. We start the fur by creating the shadows in between different clumps of fur. It's those shadows that show the length, direction, texture and everything. It's like a fur map. I often refer to this as a fur map. It's a great way to start with your fur on any angle. Shorter on the head, of course, so a few smaller strokes. I always maintain this is probably the most important part of the whole painting in pastel, because it gives you shape, gives you form, it gives you a fur map, and then the rest of it is simpler as a result. So just adding colour over your tonal sketch, underpainting if you like. All the details as such are there, all the tones are there, and you can use very simple colours over the top, as we'll see. So a little heart shape nose, like that. And a lot of animals, rabbits, hares, cats, have that little heart shaped nose. Going down to a point, the cleft between, dare I say it again, the hair lip. Obviously where we get the term from. A little bit of shadow underneath the lips into the chin. And soft, short fur texture surrounding those big cheeks. Those big cheeks here and here that obviously are there to power, to jaw muscles for dealing with grass, dry grass, hay, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so I think that's pretty much all the sketch details we need at this point. What I'm going to do next is use the side of the pastel gently, and I'm going to add some tones. So we always start off with basically 3 tones: dark tone, mid-tone and highlight. If you imagine the paper, this lovely sandy coloured paper, is your highlight for now, then we want a mid-tone and a dark tone. As always, what I do is build up these tones in light layers. It gives you control, so if it's too light, you can add another layer on the top. If it's too dark, you'll find it very difficult to get it off, to make it lighter. So inside of the ears, first of all, and then start to rub the pastel into the paper. That makes it stick in the fibres. It also softens the mark a little bit, and even reduces the tone a little bit. But be gentle at this stage. So you don't want it to be too dark too soon. You can always add more if you want it to make it darker. And of course, we don't need to worry about texture in the ears, the fur texture, because it's very, very short. The wallpaper is ideal for visually showing that very short fur texture anyway. So we're going to start off with a kind of light to mid-tone, and then we're going to add another layer on the top that we want it to be a little bit darker. So that's the ears, because we've got a bit of a highlight on the fur around the eyes, so we don't need that, or the eye in this case. So we're looking for all the sort of mid to dark brown fur to begin with. And leaving any obvious highlights, the highlighted bit there too. You think of this as kind of like a charcoal sketch. And of course when you're working in charcoal, just charcoal, then you don't have any colour to worry about, everything is down to tonal values. It's the same here. So we'll bring his chest down into the grass, there'll be some grass in front of there later on. Follow the direction of the fur when you're doing this, so if you catch the edge of the pastel by accident, then at least it's going in the right direction. So we'll give all that a good rub in, and a little bit more tonal value in the eye. The eyes are set well back. Never forget to put tonal values in the eyes, otherwise they look a little bit bright, too bright, almost scary. So let's add another tone. So darker tone from the tip of the ears down, and then we can add some final dark tones when we do the final details later on. So just look for 3 tones to begin with: dark, medium and light. That'll be a good foundation to build on. So it is like the foundation of the whole painting, this. Your tonal sketch with your tonal underpainting. Okay, so that's the ears, a little bit darker in the forehead, around the nose, we want a bit more of a shadow underneath the nose, either side of that cleft. Give that a good rub in, maybe a tiny bit more over the nose itself. So always judge your tones bit by bit, all the way through the painting in fact. Keep adjusting the tones. Don't think that the tones you start with at this stage are necessarily the tones you're going to end up with. The tonal values are constantly changing when you start to add colour and highlights and things like that. So just keep an eye out on those tonal values. So there we are, a little bit rough around the edges, but that doesn't matter about that. Of course, when we put the highlights on later on, it'll tidy that up. So that's basically our tonal sketch. Very simple, quite sketchy, quite loose with 3 tonal values. Now, what we're going to do, before we start adding some colour to it, I'm just going to put a little bit of tonal value in the foreground. So imagine he's sitting in the long grass, poking his head out over the top of the grass. I want some shade down here. So push those corners away, and this is going to be the shadows in the grass. Notice I'm stroking the pastel in the vertical direction now, more or less, to represent the long, tall grass. This will be the sort of backdrop of the grass in the foreground. Again, rub that in. That's the tonal sketch complete. So what we'll do next, before we start thinking about details, is add some colour to it. So I'm going to use a really straightforward mid-green for the background as the base colour for the background. These are base colours, so the base colours want to be fairly simple, fairly strong. So this is our first base colour, which is this mid-green. And I wanted a kind of blurred texture in the background. Now, this green will change depending on what colour paper you're using. In this case we're using a warm sandy coloured paper, so it'll warm it up. It'll give us that sort of summery feel to it. If you use it on a grey paper, it'll cool it down. What I'm going to do is just gently apply the soft, almost 1 inch squares, haphazard squares, to get a natural blurred texture in the background. I don't want it to be too strong. I want the background to sort of fade away. Rub it round and round with your fingers to settle that into the paper. If you want it a little bit stronger, you can add more. I want it to fade out from the top, maybe a little bit stronger in the sort of mid-ground, this area. I'll add a little bit more strength of colour here. Don't forget at this point as well, you need to go just inside the edge of your subject, your hair in this case. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you'll paint over the green very easily with your highlights, but if you don't do that, you'll end up with a kind of sandy coloured outline all the way around it from the paper, which will look odd in the end. So always go just inside the edge of your subject. Now here we're going to have some longer grass, so I'm going to do grass strokes, vertical strokes again, with the side of the green pastel. And that's our basic background colour. Remember, these are base colours, nothing to do with detail at this stage, just areas of colour where we want them. So for the hair, we're going to use 2 colours. We've got a nice sort of golden brown and, believe it or not, a purple. So the purple is going to be for the cool areas, maybe a little bit of reflection in the eye, around the nose and so on, and to keep a bit of harmony with your subject in the background, we'll use purple for some wildflowers later on. So I'm going to start again with the ears, just the tips of the ears, where we have something that's predominantly black, or seems to be predominantly black. If we put a little bit of a cool colour underneath, like purple or Prussian blue, it'll add depth to that black. You won't notice it so much at the end because we're putting black over it later on, but it'll be subtle. It'll be just ideal. So I'm going to go over the pupil as well at this stage with a hint of purple as well. Remember, we're going to go over with black later on, so that'll subdue it again. Around the nose, a sort of cool nose area, the snout, shadow underneath the nose, and maybe a little bit of a shadow away from the light in the chest. And we'll come back to the purple later on when we add some more details. The second colour we're going to have, base colour, is going to be this lovely sort of golden brown. So that's all the brown fur, essentially. Even where you can see highlights, we're going to put a little hint of brown underneath where the highlights are going to go. Because if we're using white for highlights, we want to subdue those highlights a little bit. Make them a little bit warmer in this case, and by putting a nice warm colour underneath, when you put white over the top, it's going to make those highlights nice and warm. So anything else, anything that isn't covered by purple, even the highlights around the eyes, the light fur around the eyes, make those warm by putting a layer or two of this lovely golden brown underneath where the highlights are going to go. Now, earth pigments, usually the browns, are a little bit harder than most, and what you'll find on velour is velour paper does like to polish the harder pigment a little bit, so you'll find some sort of greeny dark stuff on there. Don't worry about that, that's just where the velour is trying to polish the pastel, polish the pigment. If that happens, just rub it down with your finger, like so, and then clean it up again, ready to start again, okay? So don't try to force it, just clean it up every so often. Clean up that shine and do it again. All the way down into that long grass. And we're going to use the same colour for the eye in a little while when we start the details. But I just want to make sure there's a nice coverage first. And again, the sand coloured paper keeps this nice and warm, whereas the grey tones we put down underneath darken it here and there. So it's not a uniform brown, it depends on what you've got underneath tonally. Is it a darker or a lighter colour? You only need one colour, which is great. So there's our base colours. So now we're going to start adding a little bit of detail. So again, I work from dark to mid to light. We'll come back to the eye separately in a little while. So back with my black pastel, I can use a slightly rounded corner again. And we're going to start adding a little bit more detail along with slightly darker tones. So the tips of the ears are quite dark, quite black. Going down into the centre where we've got the hairs. That's the hairs inside the ears, of course. And just giving a little firm stroke to soften it off. You can see that's much sharper, much clearer than the ear on the right hand side now. And hares do have these sort of black tipped ears. And we do see quite a lot locally where we take the dog Ella for a walk. I think just a few nights ago, a few evenings ago, we saw about at least 10. And just going to darken this bit of brown on the back of the ears. Not trying to put too much texture in, just a little bit of texture perhaps, but let some of the brown show through here and there. And same on this side. That's essentially the back of the ear that's a little bit darker. And the inside of the ear, like so. Good firm stroke, and then we can work on the rest of the fur again. So I'm going to add a little bit more texture to the fur with these shadow strokes. Again, watch for length and direction. If it comes out too dark or too grey, and then we can always add a little bit of colour over the top of that again, so you can bring back the browns. And you can repeat this layer after layer. So you can do 3, 4, 10, 20 layers of fur if you want to. If you like a lot of detail, just dark, medium, light, just keep repeating as often as you want. A dark edge around the eye on the opposite side. And again, down to the nose, we've got some little sort of ridges of fur just above the nose. And remember, rubbing soften that texture a little bit. Again, the shadow underneath the lower lid, the bit above and below the eye is quite raised, so you're going to get shadows over the top and underneath those raised bits. And this is likely to be the shadow side. If our light's coming from the top right, it's going to be the shadow side, which is a little bit darker. Again, it's all about soft texture, building up soft texture. Don't worry about the highlights until the very end. Don't put highlights in too soon, otherwise you'll find that it'll disturb the colour you put on the top. So it'll make it quite garish. So be patient. A lot of people like to put highlights in too soon. I can see why, because it shows them, almost shows them what the finished article is going to look like. But I always argue they should be patient. Highlights in their due place right at the end. That just transforms the whole thing anyway. It's worth waiting for. More texture in the chest. Now we'll start adding some detail to the eye, nose and mouth. We'll start with the nose first. I'm going to use a slightly sharper corner. I always reckon when you're doing a portrait of an animal, or even a person, come to that, the bits that people like to focus on are the ears, eyes, nose and mouth, the features. So if we concentrate all our detail, strongest tones around those features, ears, eyes, nose and mouth, which are all mostly on the same plane anyway, and it's going to bring them forward. Again, cleft between the lips, a little bit of texture either side of the cleft, and then we have his mouth, which is ridged by fur, so rather than just draw a line across like that, try to make it almost like a furry edge, into the shadow of the chin, and a little bit more texture around here I think. I don't want to overdo the texture. A lot of this style of painting works with the final highlights. But if you want to add more texture in a sharper corner, then by all means, go ahead. Probably enough texture for me now. So before we put any kind of highlights on there, let's work on the eye. So I'm using again a slightly sharper corner to get the detail in the eye. These eyelashes at the top, the shadow underneath the eyelashes, and then we want to get the roundness of the eye in first. So again, a little bit of shadow in the corner of the eye there. The roundness of the eyeball coming down into the tear duct in the corner, that little sort of angle there. Give it a rub just to soften it off, and then the pupil. Again, don't think you have to leave a space for the reflected highlight, the reflection. Just go over the whole pupil. I want to leave a little bit of the purple showing towards the top, just a hint. Add a little bit of depth to it, so it's not too cartoony black. If you make it too black, it can look quite cartoony. And then we'll go back to our golden brown. This is going to be our basic colour for the iris. So around the pupil, we use the corner of the pastel there. The iris, that's probably enough colour. And then we'll start putting some soft highlights in. So we'll do highlights in two stages. I call them secondary highlights and primary highlights. So the secondary highlights are going to be highlights in the fur, around the eyes and so on. Whereas the primary highlights are going to be those finishing touches where the light's catching something, you get reflection in the eyes, all that sort of thing. Before we do that, we just round this up a little bit. Always keep an eye, excuse the pun again, always keep an eye on what's going on before you start something else. You might just want to change that shape a little bit. So, secondary highlights. White pastel on top of your colour is going to make it warmer. So where you go over the brown, for example, with a white pastel, as long as you don't press too hard, you're going to get a nice sort of soft, creamy highlight. So let's start with the hairs inside the ears. Going from the outside in, so you can stroke them the opposite way if you like. The key thing, whichever way you're doing it, from right to left if you're left-handed, or left to right if you're right-handed, the key thing is always just to rub away the start of the hair, the roots if you like, and leave the ends exposed. So you can see this is a pure white, but of course we have colour underneath, golden brown underneath. I'm not pressing too hard, it makes it a nice sort of creamy, warm white highlight. Quite hairy ears. There's a lot of hair references going on here, isn't there? Quite hairy ears as our hair. And we'll do some soft highlights inside the ear. The outer edge of the ear is going to be, this part is going to be a primary highlight at the end, so we'll leave that. Anything around the edges are likely to be primary highlights where the light's catching. So don't do them yet. Do the soft secondary highlights first. Again, rub away the roots, leaving the shaft of the hairs, ends of the hairs, nice and sharp. Again, we've got a primary highlight coming down there. And at the back of the ear as well, so we'll leave that for now. A little bit more on here, I think. And the thing is, because people will always see highlights in the painting before they see anything else, the rest of it can be quite rough in terms of detail. In other words, not too much detail, but the minute you start putting final details on with your white pastel or your highlight pastel, whatever colour it is, those are the ones that people are going to see first, so keep all your detail for them. So there's some little soft highlights on the rest of the fur around the head. Let's get a little bit of texture in between these darker and mid-tone colours. Again, don't press on, just keep it nice and light. Keep it looking nice and soft. Length and direction is important, of course. Short fur around the head. And build it up bit by bit. Down towards the nose. Nice and soft, that will give you a very, very pale brown. A little ridge on the nose there. And then we'll do the eyebrows or the rims above and below softly, so we can pick up the brown underneath. Down to the corner of the eye and the lower rim, the same, nice and soft. Don't overdo it. You can always add more, remember. The same principle applies when you're doing highlights as when you're using the darker colour to start with. You can always add more highlight. So if you're not sure, just err on the side of caution. Nice soft highlights on the fur, around the cheeks, down into the neck, around the muzzle. Corner of the eye coming down to the nose, again, first sort of splaying out, go from the corner of the nose upwards and outwards. Either way you can do it. If you find it hard to push the pastel, then pull it down, but just rub away at the roots as before, like that. So rub it in the direction that the fur grows, and you'll be fine. A little bit of a soft highlight underneath the nose itself. Like so, that's just slightly paler fur. And again, little soft highlights texture in the neck and the chest. Quite coarse fur, hare's have. Of course, looking anyway. I haven't had the opportunity to touch a hare to feel how soft it is. It has the appearance, visual appearance of being quite coarse, quite textured. Of course, we get light shining on that coarse fur. This gives these lighter touches. Again, just give it a nice soft stroke. So we're almost ready for our primary highlights and finishing the eye and other details, but before we get to that, what I want to do is make sure that we've got all the elements in the background and the foreground sorted out. So we get all the fun bits, exciting bits, and right at the end. So just keep checking your fur highlights. Lean back and squint. That's always a good way of checking your tonal values. If you lean back and squint, what looks to be quite light when you're sat right on top of it, when you distance yourself, can almost fade away. Always give it a bit of a squint test. There we go. So, background. Now what I want to do is just add some little touches of soft light in the background. So I'm going to use the side of the white pastel again. Just here and there, a little sort of highlight. Maybe it's dappled light catching the grasses or the wildflowers or whatever it is in the background. Or it could just be dappled light coming through a wooded area in the background. Gently does it. Little soft stabs with your pastel first. Try not to do too many circles like that, because for me that looks quite artificial. I'd rather just do little sort of haphazard strokes with the side of the pastel, almost squares, rectangles, that sort of stuff. And when you rub it round and round, it looks a lot more natural. Lean back and squint, check the light, and a few more if you want to. That gives it a nice sort of atmospheric lighting, I think, around our hair. Yeah, that should do it nicely. So, the other thing to do is with the purple, again we're going to use the purple for some sort of wildflowers. So in the background again we might just have hints. Imagine a blurred photograph, you might just see little hints of wildflowers growing in the background. You can use any colour you like, of course, but one reason I like to use the purple in this case is because it picks up any hints of purple we've got in our hair. So any colours you can find to use in the background as well as your subject, gives you that sort of sense of harmony. So just little touches here and there. Again, rub it round and round. So foreground now, we're doing this little bit. What we're going to have is sort of long grasses. So I'm going to take the green first, start from underneath the picture or outside of the picture and stroke upwards in the direction the grass is growing. Now the grass will appear to be quite long and quite thick. So Hare isn't that big. It's quite a big animal, the size of a small dog I should think, but even so, these blades of grass are going to be quite thick underneath. Give it a little rub. Now I'm going to go in between those with the golden brown again for some dried grasses perhaps. So we get a little bit of a mixture. Don't be afraid to go over your subject when you're doing this. And again, you can build a lot of layers, depending on how thick you want your grass to be. So maybe stick another couple of green ones over the top just to break it up so it doesn't look too regular, makes it look much more natural. And then we'll use our purple again, pick out some wildflowers in in the foreground, suggestions of wildflowers. Again, rub them round and round. And finally, with the white, we put some highlights in. So maybe we'll have white centres of these flowers. Again, you can put your own wildflowers in if you want to, different colours and so on. Then what we'll do is put a little bit of shine here and there on some of the grasses, that pale green, some of the thicker blades, the light's catching it, and it's going to be pale green because we're not pressing on too hard with the white pastel. It helps to give more depth. Same with the brown ones, a hint of a light catching one or two of those. Then we can put some dried sort of meadow grasses in with maybe types with the ears, seed heads on the top, just here and there. And again, as with fur, you can add lots and lots of layers of your grasses. And just be playful with it, creative with it. And as I said, you can add more layers if you want to, put a few more brown ones in. Really bury that hair in that field of grass. But now we'll come on to our primary highlights for the hair. So that with the white. Before we do that, I just want to make sure that we've got all our darks how we want them. So this final stage is all about adjusting your final tones, your darkest tone and your lightest tone. The largest tone, of course, is going to be our primary highlights. I just want to add a little bit more to the edges of the ears, the tips of the ears. That's going to bring them off that background a little bit more. Okay, and same with this one. Just lift it off that background for the final time. And the darks around here, so maybe a little bit more dark. And his nostrils. And if we've lost a little bit of colour, I want to make that a little bit more coloured. Just at this stage, even at this stage, you can add more colour to it. All the way through, you can keep adding colour, adding tone, and so on. That's the beauty of working on velour paper. It's so forgiving. You just keep adding layer after layer. Again, a little bit of shadow around the cleft. Make sure that all those features are now coming out towards you. And finally, the little mouth, way down into the chin, and of course we mustn't forget the eye. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'll deal with the highlights and reflections in the eye, and then tidy it up with the black pastel afterwards, so it remains nice and sharp. So what we've got is a little bit of shadow underneath the eyelid there. I've probably got a little bit of a lighter brown away from the light. As the light's coming from the right hand side, then it's going to shine through the eye and pick up a little bit of a lighter brown on the left hand side. So that's just a gentle hint of white over that golden brown, like so. And it's going to pick up a shine towards the top of the eye on that curved section. So follow the light down, use the corner of your white pastel just to dab on that reflected highlight. Hit the kind of sunspot first, and you can always put a little curve next to that to show the eyeball is curved. We can sit back and squint at it, make sure you've got enough shine on there as you want it, and we can tidy the rest of the eye up with the black. The reason I do the black tidying up last of all is because by adding those highlights and reflections, you might just sort of rough up the edge a little bit. The edge wants to be nice and sharp. The lower part of the pupil can be a little bit darker. Lower corner of the eye, and just have a little bit more texture around the eye itself. If If you've lost a little bit of colour in the eye, again, go back. Just add a little bit more colour in the corner of that golden brown. More of a lift. So I think we're ready for our final primary highlights now. Again, we'll start at the ears and work down. So light shining through here is going to catch the edges of the ears. You don't have to make them white, of course, even if the primary highlights. The idea is, even if you want them to be warm over a little bit of colour, you don't have to press too hard. The harder you press, the brighter, the whiter that highlight will be. So it's just enough to lift it off the background. Use your sitting back, use your squint test just to check before you go too bonkers with it. Okay, you can always have more. Have a little bit of backlighting around the ear, like so. Maybe one or two of these hairs inside the ear catching a bit more light, the edge of the ear just catching a hint of light on that curve. Again, lift it off the background. Same on here. Just catching a hint of light at the back of the ear. And this side of the ear is catching more light. It's still fairly soft. I don't want it to be white. The great thing about these primary highlights at the end is that you can actually tidy up the shape. The final shaping of the ears, noses, things like that, right at the end. So a little bit of light shining on the top of his head, maybe around the edge of the eye, around the edge of the nose. And the cheek facing the light, it's going to catch more light, of course, so we can exaggerate that a little bit more. Even if it's not showing on the original photograph, we can exaggerate that lighting. Tiny bit more around here, and around the right hand side of the chin. And we could also use a sharp corner now to put some whiskers in. Loads and loads of whiskers, especially on this side that's catching the light. The eye whiskers too. But always when you do whiskers, stroke them in with a sharp corner like that and then just softly bury the roots with your finger. So a tiny bit more light on there, and then again loads and loads of whiskers. Golden rule of thumb is that they're shorter and finer at the front, longer and thicker towards the back. Again, bury the roots, a little bit of rub of your finger. There are one or two black ones in there, so just sketch one or two of those in as well, just to make it more natural. A mixture of black and white whiskers. And then back to our primary highlights, so again with a little bit of backlighting around the neck, down into that long grass, just to lift it off the background, and a little bit on his neck and chest, a little bit more on the right hand side, that's the direction of the light, disappearing down into the grass, and again final bit just to exaggerate that shape on the upper and lower rims. Lean back and squint, so I can afford a touch more on the right hand side, I think. So don't be afraid to adjust. Go back, add more highlights as you deem necessary. Almost there. Final check. I think we're about done. I might just pop a little bit more texture into the centre of the forehead. They're quite textured hairs, so just a little bit more. There we go, a little bit more on there. So all of these these final tonal adjustments right at the end so they stay nice and fresh. A bit more shine on some of the hairs there. And I think we're about ready to call that one finished. So, remember you can add lots and lots of layers to it. Your fur texture, your foreground, anything. But I think it makes a nice little pastel sketch. Just got a tiny bit more on the pupil there before we call it finished. And again, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you have a go at this at home using either your own materials or you can purchase the home workshop kit from the website which is showing on the screen now. If you do have a go, then please post your images on the Facebook page showing on the screen. I'd love to see them, and thanks for watching again. We'll see you next time.